Up next, the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show with Snowden Bishop. After this message.
Evergreen's calling.
You're busy, running around from work to kids to evening events. Healthcare shouldn't be adding to your daily running around. Simplify your healthcare with HealthTerra. For only $15 per month per individual or $18 per month per family with up to 9 kids, by the way, you can eliminate doctor office visits with 24/7 access to doctors via phone, video, or the mobile app. Not only do you get prescriptions filled over the phone, but save up to 85% on those prescriptions. This is a supplemental plan and not insurance. Healthcare made easy. HealthTerra.com.
And now, it's time for the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show with Snowden Bishop. Listen in as Snowden interviews cannabis industry pioneers, marijuana experts, policymakers, medical practitioners, patients, and other amazing individuals with compelling stories to share. It all happens right now. Here's the Cannabis Reporter, Snowden Bishop.
Hello, and welcome back to the Cannabis Reporter. I'm your host, Snowden Bishop. If you follow the news about cannabis, you've probably noticed the flurry of media activity responding to the DEA's announcement on December 14th in the Federal Registry about revised rule that separated and assigned a new tracking code to cannabis extracts. That includes non-psychotropic cannabidiol, or CBD as it's most commonly known. It also puts it squarely by itself in the Schedule I controlled substances right next to cannabis. The news went viral in social media and set in motion a chain reaction of concern from industry professionals, medical practitioners, and patients who rely upon legal access to CBD for their health. I have good news and bad news about this. First, let me give you the bad news. Concern about the future of marijuana is warranted. But it's not because of this DEA revised ruling. The good news is this. Contrary to what you've heard in the news, the DEA did not make CBD illegal. Cannabis cultivation has been illegal since Congress passed the 1937 Tax Stamp Act, and cannabis derivatives, including hemp-derived CBD extracts, have been illegal to produce or purchase since 1977 when the Congress passed the Controlled Substances Act. First, it's important to clarify the meaning of this announcement by the DEA. As a controlled substance, all forms of cannabis are accounted for and tracked by a single numerical identifier code, 7360, and according to the announcement, the purpose of the ruling is to provide a distinction between cannabis extracts and THC amongst Schedule I controlled substances. Now, I have a lawyer here today who's probably going to correct me on some of this because there's so much confusion out there in the media and just in general about what this really means. But anyway, cannabinoids have their very own classification code 7350 among Schedule I controlled substances. If you're thinking that the future of hemp-derived CBD is looking bleak, take heart. Despite the new code, CBD is not illegal and likely won't be in the near future. In simple terms, the revised ruling by the DEA is both irrelevant and misleading. It's irrelevant because the new code only applies to cannabinoid extracts that contain only a single cannabinoid. Considering the vast array of cannabinoid molecules that exist in the cannabis plant, pairing that with the challenge of extracting and separating phytonutrients on a nanonuclear level, it would be scientifically implausible, not to mention cost prohibitive, to make a pure CBD oil containing just one cannabinoid. It's misleading because an appellate court ruling made hemp products forever legal to import and sell in the United States. And it's really not up to the DEA to make new policy or undermine existing laws that supersede the Controlled Substances Act. But that's the topic of today's show and what our guests are here to discuss. Before we get started, I wanted to give a shout out to our listeners tuning in to the XRQK radio network stations everywhere. Thank you so much for listening. In the studio with me today to provide legal perspective and probably correct me what I know is Tabitha Myers, a Phoenix-based cannabis lawyer from Resnick and Lewis. Welcome and thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Joining us on the phone from California is Andrew Hard, a media specialist who is intimately involved in educating families about cannabis alternatives and helping them to gain access. Andrew, are you there with us?
I am. Thank you for having me on, Snowden, and really nice to meet you, Counselor, and very excited to talk about this with you.
Thank you so much for being here. And also joining us on the phone from California is Damaris Higuera, mother of young Sadie, who we've recently written about. She depends upon access to CBD to keep her child alive. Thank you for being here, Damaris. I'm excited for you to share your story with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Tabitha, let's get right to the legality of all of this, because I'm sure that as much as I do know about it, I don't know enough, and I'm not a lawyer, and there's so much confusion out there. What can you say about this, the news that came out in this revised ruling from the DEA?
Well, Snowden, I would certainly agree with you that the new ruling is irrelevant and misleading. This appears to be an overstepping by the DEA. For people that have been around a little while, they've seen this happen before. This is deja vu, like you mentioned. They tried to do this again, or they tried to do it for the first time back in 2001. They enacted rules that prohibited hemp seed oil and hemp cakes, and even if they only contain trace amounts of THC, which is usually the case if it's made from hemp. And then in that case, the Ninth Circuit struck it down. It took a few years. That first rule was in 2001. The Ninth Circuit ruled on 2004. So it takes a few years for, the courts to slap the DEA's hand, as it were. But I would say everyone remain calm. It's probably an unconstitutional overstep by the DEA, and we'll see this again in the courts, I'm sure.
Don't you find it curious that they would actually try to separate cannabinoid from the classification or the numerical tracking classification of cannabis?
Yeah, that was interesting, and they also included resins in that new classification. If you read the whole rule, and that may be pure administrative, necessity. They may be seeing, as we are in the cannabis market, all sorts of different kinds of extracts and resins and waxes and all that, and so they may just be doing this to keep up with the modern market, as it were, in the cannabis industry.
Yeah, well, if you were an eternal optimist, you might think that the reason that they were separating out CBD was to eventually deschedule that by itself, but in a way that wouldn't really make any sense, because cannabinoid is intrinsically part of the cannabis plant, and as its own whole category, cannabis, 7360 is actually a controlled substance still. I mean,
yeah, I tend not to be optimistic or naive when it comes to the DEA.
Yeah.
They tend to have their own agenda that doesn't necessarily jive with their constitutional mandate.
Yeah,
No, I think that we'll see. I mean, they essentially, if what they said is true, which it wasn't exactly in the statute, it came through from comments. Someone asked a question: does this include the CBD, even if there's no THC or trace amounts of THC? And they wrote, yes, we consider it at Schedule 1. That was a very purposeful step by the DEA. I mean, they write all their comments or response to the comments and with, accuracy, and they go over it over and over again. So that was a deliberate act for sure by the DEA. But again, it's an overstepping.
Yeah.
Andrew, that flies in the face of Ninth Circuit Court ruling, HIA versus DEA. The DEA lost that exempted the non-psychoactive parts of the hemp plant, the stem and the stalk, and the seeds of the plant, where you can get CBD. It's where the majority of these hemp CBD product makers are making CBD, and it's a federal court ruling that exempted those parts of the plant. You can import hemp products from Europe, and product has and sell them. It's a court case the DEA lost. As part of that court case, the DEA actually tried to promulgate rules that would have made products like that controlled substances, and the court struck that down and actually issued language basically telling them they could never try to make any kind of enforcement action over those parts of the plant again. So, honestly, watching the coverage of this, I mean, what happened was, I'm a former journalist. I worked as a journalist for 12 years for Fox and for Corporate Counsel magazine. Huffington Post and Leafly post two extremely alarmist articles about this, saying the DEA now says CBD is illegal.
Yeah.
And not, which is not true. And honestly, that's not even what the DEA is saying about this. When they've been asked about it, they've basically said this is a new tracking code that we've assigned for marijuana extracts. It's an administrative move, and it doesn't change anything. Is actually what they said in an interview with the Cannabist. But keep in mind, the Huffington Post pulled their article off of the internet. It's now gone at the link where it popped up Wednesday. Leafly has issued a follow-up article saying, hold on, the DEA's move to criminalize CBD may not be legal. And I think what they're missing there is the DEA never made any move to criminalize CBD. And those first articles have caused a crop up of, Rolling Stone marijuana extracts, including CBD, are Schedule I drugs. That's not true. There was no scheduling action taken. The International Business Times, DEA new cannabis laws make CBD and other extracts Schedule I. All of that is not true. And as a former journalist, I can just say I'm saddened and totally disgusted to see the news media just
run with this,
up in this panic and not do any reporting or check their actual facts.
Right. I think it's one thing that is true though is that cannabinoid has been included in the Schedule I controlled substance as part of the cannabis plant all along. But
as part of the marijuana plant, yes, and that is an element of confusion. I mean, number one, CBD is not scheduled. Synthetic CBD is scheduled, but CBD from the natural botanical plant actually is not. That actually is a fact that lots of people overlook. Also, I mean, this new tracking code, yes, it looks like it's going to possibly impact shipping of CBD extracted from marijuana, which is actually what this is, a tracking from marijuana extracts. And also it seems like CBD possibly extracted from hemp grown in the United States. However, there is still this federal court precedent, which gets ignored far too much, which is Ninth Circuit Court, HIA versus DEA was decided in 2004, that exempted the stem and stalk of the hemp plant and the seeds of the hemp plant and said you can import these materials and make products for them. And that's a court case that the DEA lost. Well, that literally the court case says the DEA has no authority over this area of the plant and can't do anything about it.
Yeah, real quick, just for people who don't know, HIA actually stands for the Hemp Industry Association.
Yes, who sued the DEA.
Yes.
And the DEA lost in the Ninth Circuit, an appellate court, in a federal court case, and declined to appeal because they basically knew it would have gone to the Supreme Court and they would have lost, and they would have had the same precedent as a Supreme Court verdict.
Yeah, Tabitha?
I was just to piggyback off what he's saying. The Controlled Substances Act specifically excludes hemp, the mature stalks, which we use for hemp, the fiber and the oil and the cakes made from that plant. So even in the CSA, the Controlled Substances Act, we haven't seen that the CBD or any products from the hemp plant, they're specifically excluded.
Now, here's a question for you, because this is something that that I was really unaware of, and I do a lot of research, and this is just not something that's crossed my path. So if it is excluded in that way, why is it that growing hemp, is illegal still to this day since 1937? And, hemp obviously is not something that's going to get children high, right?
Right.
So why is it that it is illegal federally to grow it?
Well, actually, technically, it's not. The 2014 Farm Bill made it legal to research for research universities as well as state-sanctioned research. So they do have to get the states have to go to the government, get a permit to grow. And, a few states have done that. We see a lot of it in Pennsylvania right now. But since 2014, it's actually been legal.
Right, but not for the everyday person. Like, let's say I wanted to grow my own hemp in my backyard to make pie filling out of this.
It has to be supervised by a university research study, basically.
Right. So technically for everyone other than research institutions who are licensed to do it, it's illegal to grow.
Right. Yeah, that is true under federal law, and we've seen some states enacting their own laws, of course.
Yeah, you can grow it in Colorado.
Right.
Kentucky actually sued the federal government for the right to their hemp seeds and won, and Kentucky has started growing hemp after suing the federal government for commercial use. But yes, the Farm Bill was a major step forward that at least you could grow it and have it supervised by research. The real answer to that is industrial interests outlawed hemp along with marijuana in the 30s. It was William Randolph Hearst, the famous media mogul who owned both sides of the newspaper industry, owned all the newspapers and owned all the printing presses that they were printed on, and he knew that hemp was a major threat to his paper mill printing press operation.
Yeah, and he had acres and acres and acres of forest that he wanted to exploit in cahoots with DuPont, who had the chemical to mulch wood into paper.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
So it really goes back to there, and the hemp plant, it's a wonderful plant. I mean, you can literally make over 20,000 different products. Plants, shirts, rope, literally the rigging of ships. You can literally build a house out of hemp. It can actually be an excellent clean burning biofuel. Henry Ford's first car ran on a mix of ethanol and hemp seed oil, and it actually has so many industrial applications that's actually what happened is the petroleum industry, the cotton industry, the paper industry have just chased this thing, this wonderful plant that actually the United States was founded upon, out of existence. And honestly, what we're seeing and talking about today with this reaction to this DEA ruling of the DEA has said hemp CBD is illegal. I mean, watching the propaganda continue to perpetuate into the mainstream, actually national news media like the Washington Times, it makes you really sad. And I literally, as a former journalist, I have a lot of respect for the profession, and I worked really, really hard and pounded the phone a lot. And to see, a couple articles that were alarmist and false that the DEA had suddenly declared CBD illegal, which isn't true, to watch that just spread online and
like
copy
wildfire.
And paste internet journalism of, we're RollingStone.com. We're just going to copy and paste that, not check. Like, are there any, federal court rulings that fly in the face of this that maybe we could research?
It kind of goes along the lines of what's happening everywhere in social media and in mainstream media, where these false stories are getting propagated just because they make money.
Donald Trump talks about it himself and talks about how he manipulated the news media that way. Because it acts like that. Yeah, exactly.
Well, here's an interesting point too. In the revised rules register that came out, Chuck Rosenberg, the acting administrator for the DEA, actually cited a comment by an unnamed pharmaceutical company saying that it praised the new classification. And I just thought that was really telling about,
telling.
The motive behind this. If it's not for optics, it's for political reasons. And like I said in the opening, we do have reason to be concerned about the future of marijuana, given the temperature in Washington, that is now sort of leaning, with the new administration coming in, they're sort of leaning toward very staunch opponents of marijuana. Jeff Sessions is the one. But Andrew, I wanted to maybe have you talk a little bit. You work with a lot of families who absolutely depend upon access to CBD for the critical health of their children. And we have Damaris on the line too, who you have worked with a lot to help her get her story out and to help other families get access. Would you like to say a little bit before we bring Damaris in?
Sure, absolutely. And hi, Damaris. Sorry that we've been talking about politics for 15 minutes without you getting to talk. But I won't take too much time. I'll just let Damaris tell her story. But the Higuera family lives out in San Diego, right nearby me. They live in Ramona. I've been really lucky to know them, and I literally have been privileged to get to have a camera crew out to film their daughter's first day of school, who literally doctors never thought that she would have. Her name is Sadie, and I'll really let Damaris kind of tell you her story, but I can say literally what you have here is the case of a child who had a very serious genetic disorder, who doctors literally tried to prescribe her a hero pill because they didn't know what would help her, because I mean she was just suffering so badly, and the hero pill literally would have ended her life. And her parents started researching alternative medicine and other options once that was offered to them, and thank God that they did. And now they are using a high CBD a product with Sadie called RSHO, and really their story is important to get out in the face of all this craziness and kind of misinformation, because the honest most important thing is the families and helping children who need it.
Damaris, I just want to say we actually put the story of your daughter up on our website, and I am so touched by your courage. And what you've been through has just been incredible. And I really appreciate you being here. Tell me a little bit about Sadie.
Well, Sadie, right now she's 3.5 years old. But when she was 8 months, she was dying of a chronic, uncontrollable epilepsy, presenting up to 300 seizures a day.
Wow.
At that time, it was horrible. I mean, at that time, she didn't have more medical options, no more treatments. She was dying of this horrible condition, and she was dying of a complication from pharmaceutical drug side effects. The medicines that she was taking at that time never gave her a good control of her condition, but they sure give her a lot of side effects, taking her life pretty close to the end. I just think no parent should ever go through what we went. We all have the right to choose the best treatment for our children, and we all should have access to a natural alternative. At this point, I really wish we could have access to CBD, since the beginning.
Yeah.
I really wish I could have the right to choose between a pharmaceutical and a plant.
So when you first heard about this news from the DEA, what was your first thought?
It's just, to me, it doesn't make any sense. I definitely think CBD should be taken out of the Schedule I drugs. Rescheduled cannabis will give the step in the right direction for medical research, and will give it cannabis really medical value. This can be like that. I mean, we all should have access to it. There's not only my daughter, unfortunately. There's many people in situations like her where they already tried everything and nothing is working, and they just give her more side effects, more issues, more medical issues, and why we have to destroy our children's little bodies with all that pharmaceuticals when we can turn to a natural option with no side effects, with no harm.
Tell me what happened when you gave Sadie her first dose of CBD. What was she experiencing at that time, and what happened?
That was a moment that I'm never gonna forget. That's for sure. We have another 2 girls, and I took my 2 older girls to the park when my husband gave her first dosage. We all were nervous, and that was something new. That was our last option, and so I went out of the house with my older girls, and when I come back, my husband was, the first thing I was like, how's Sadie, how she's doing, how she looks, and he only answered, go look at her. And I panicked. I said, oh my God, is she okay? Tell me. And he was like, no, calm down, she's fine. I don't want to say nothing, you go see her. I walk in the room, I look at her, and I call her name, and her little face turned to me and started focusing, what thing that she never did before. I was like, I started crying. I hold her hand, and her hand, I put my finger on her hand, and she started squishing my finger, and I keep calling her, and she was just focusing, tracking me. It was something amazing. She always was with her eyes closed, and she opened her eyes, was twitching it, no focusing. She was totally out of herself. Either because she had a seizure or because she had her meds and now she was sedated. So it wasn't a lie. She was pretty much a vegetable at that time. No interaction, nothing.
No responses.
No.
Yeah, you had, in one article that I read, you'd mentioned that it was almost as if she was sleeping from the time she was born.
That was how my other girls called him. She was like, why does the baby sleep all the time? And she sleeps during the day, and she sleeps during the night, and she's growing, and she's still not waking up. They see the other babies with their friends or whatever, and they see Sadie was different, like she was sleeping all the time. And that's what she was. I mean, 300 seizures a day, you can imagine how much damage. Give it to her every single day, and then, okay, now she's on a medicine. It's not working well. Let's try another one. Okay, now she's still seizing. Let's give her the rescue med. Okay, that rescue med now knocks her out. She's on respiratory distress. She's now with a side effect. It was horrible. It got to the point like her neuro said, okay, she's done. We tried everything. I don't have nothing else to offer. The last medicine that she said that we can try if we want, it will end her life within a few weeks anyways, because she couldn't go to the bathroom anymore. She couldn't breathe on her own. She had just the side effects of the medicines, and she's still ceasing. Like they never give it a control.
Yeah. So I mean, the what she was experiencing really had nothing to do with her congenital condition. Is that kind of how you see it?
I see it. It was 50-50. 50 was her condition, her epilepsy.
Right.
And then when she started with that, so many strong medicines, she got, she's got the seizure activity. Now she has a kidney damage. Now she has irritability because what medicine she's on. Now she has GI issues. Now she has respiratory distress, and that wasn't related to her syndrome or her condition. That was related to the pharmaceuticals that she was on.
Right.
So that's why she was just getting to the end pretty quickly, because the combination of her condition and the treatment that she was on.
Yeah. Tabitha, as a lawyer, when you hear this, does it make sense to you that, I mean, obviously it makes no sense that cannabis is a Schedule I narcotic, right?
Very true.
But why is it that all of us, as Americans, as global citizens, sit by and allow pharmaceuticals to get away with this kind of damage?
Yeah, this is basically the stories that got me involved with cannabis. I mean, it breaks your heart. And there is no justification. I mean, we're allowing people to suffer for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
And in many cases, this, as she was saying, the medicine is better. We have this natural plant that is far superior than any pharmaceutical we have, and yet we're being sold a bill of lies, essentially, that this is a harmful drug. And we're seeing it still. I mean, with Jeff Sessions, Trump's pick for Attorney General,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's famously quoted as saying, good people don't smoke marijuana. I mean, it's just this a long-standing
Well, the demonization began in 1937.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's gone on and on and on. It's horrifying, actually. And I mean, on this show, I've talked about this a lot because I've gone through the issue of my father, who was basically given 2 weeks to live, and come to find out it was because of the benzodiazepines and antipsychotics they were giving to him. I mean, he was literally on his deathbed, and the doctors told me to call hospice. I said no, and under the radar, started giving him CBD, and all of a sudden, like that, and now he's on the mend. So what would you advise? Like, let's say that someone, the Herrera family, for example, let's say that they came to you and said, this is what these pharmaceuticals have done to my child. I mean, how do you advise people who do talk to you about this?
I mean, do your research. I mean, there's so many great resources and stories now that we can see that, look, this medicine not only helps with extreme seizures, which it does, but also pain and nausea and PTSD and all these wonderful benefits that we get from this plant. And if you don't live in a state where it's legal, we were seeing a lot of people move for that reason, to Colorado, to Hawaii, to Arizona.
So
Counselor, would it be you're the expert to rely. Would it be totally outside the bounds of literally, some kind of like class action lawsuit of parents saying, pharma industry or FDA, poisoning our kids, I mean, like Sadie has like horrible damage to her kidneys, as Damaris was saying. Or, I mean, Counselor, about the biggest actual drug addiction epidemic in the country is the opioid painkiller epidemic.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what
suing the pharma industry for poisoning the
environment and children,
poisoning the American people. It's just crazy. It's a side of the world I definitely never wanted to see or work in. And as you're asking, Stone, I wonder if a family has any legal recourse.
Right. That's kind of what I was getting at. What could families do if they're suffering this kind of damage?
Well, I mean, yeah, of course there are obviously legal routes you can go against Big Pharma, but for me the biggest problem is that the laws need to change, because people won't see this as a viable option until the stigma is gone, and that starts at petitioning our local state representatives and congressmen and getting change, which we're seeing. 28 states now have medical programs. Majority of Americans see it as a good thing. And for me, of course, class actions are always, if you've suffered real damage like the family has, those are a viable course as well. But for me, it's getting the government out of this, out of choosing what's best medicine for our own family, and getting the stigma off of it.
Yeah, and another question that I have along the legal lines is, Since the appellate court upheld the right for hemp to be imported and sold legally here in the United States, a lot of companies sell CBD oil online. What is to stop a family in Missouri, say, that has, or let me think of a Wyoming, that only allow a fraction of the people who need cannabis to access CBD? Can't they order it online and give it to their children without any threat of being prosecuted?
Certainly. Yeah. I mean, you can get it at Whole Foods, you can get it at Amazon, and maybe Andrew can speak more to this, but as of right now, the hemp-based CBD oil or the hemp oil you can get pretty much anywhere. I mean, you can get it Amazon Prime it to your house the next day. I mean, it's but if it comes from the cannabis plant, the marijuana plant, the non hemp based plant, then you do have to get it from the dispensary. But I mean, my advice would be try the hemp CBD oil first and see if that works.
Yeah. Now, Andrew, you work with Dr. Titus.
He's a client.
Right. His products, I know, he's developed actually the CBD that the Huera family is on. That is from the hemp plant, correct?
Yes, that's correct, and I'm really glad you asked me. So Dr. Stuart Titus has a video online about this now, trying to kind of assuage the panic.
Yeah.
I mean, as you know, the Hemp Industries Association, the HIA that sued the DEA, has also launched, actually I thought very clever, the Sky is Not Falling campaign to quell some of the crazy panic around this. And as I mentioned again, I'm really disappointed in the news media for just seizing on the panic and allowing this. I mean, I know, if it bleeds, it leads. That's what they do. But the lack of reporting and fact checking and yes, so now this has become a whole industry. So I mean, what Dr. Tice's company has done, Medical Marijuana Inc., they're basically one of the biggest clients of my PR firm, CMW Media. They innovated in a way that hasn't been really properly told in the news media, and they looked at HIA versus DEA, and they said, well, look at this. The Ninth Circuit Court, in this 2004 court ruling that the DEA lost, said it specifically exempted parts of the hemp plant from the DEA's control completely, is what it did. And it said that the stem and the stalk and the seeds of the plant are, quote-unquote, non-psychoactive, and you're fine to import the products made from it into the United States and sell them. And they figured out it's very difficult to do, but you can extract CBD from these parts of the plant, and you can make products from them, including the RSHO one that the Higueras found. After basically months and months and months of total hell, because it was a last resort instead of a first one.
Right, and the efficacy of the CBD that they're taking is just as potent as if they had derived it from the resins or flowers. Is that right?
Well, a lot of that is being debated, and keep in mind, I don't want to say that that's 100% right. There's a lot of talk in the cannabis community about the entourage effect, and is even more THC good. And I think it'll depend. It's like I'm the furthest. I'm a former journalist, like a PR man. Like I'm the furthest from a doctor, and the problem is there aren't any doctors researching this who can talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think what it's going to show is for some of these families, more THC may actually be better or work better.
Mm-hmm.
And it needs to be discussed, and whatever laws need to be changed for those families, it needs to be done and fought and done swiftly. But for a lot of families, yes. Just the hemp CBD works as well. But I do know that's not always the case, and there is a debate about that, and that's a good one. And really, what's sad is it's probably going to take decades to have doctors actually researching this, armed with the knowledge of what the heck to tell a family like the Higueras. You think about how far away we are from that. It's very,
well,
very
not only are they uninformed, but they're just unwilling to even make themselves informed because they're afraid of the DEA. They're afraid of losing their license to prescribe, the pharmaceuticals that are not working for the people that they're treating.
And if it's a test, they agree. At least on my case, I can say they agree to our plan of care. Like you just mentioned, they can prescribe it, but they can agree to the plan of care of parents. And there's some Sata's record. What she takes is she ends in the hospital for any reason. She can keep receiving her oil while she's hospitalated.
Right,
And,
but you'd be the one that would have to administer it, correct?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
yeah, because the doctors and nurses won't do it.
No, that's still because it's no FDA approval and all that. But I mean, they see the results and they say, okay, well, she was ready to leave this world and nothing was working, and then she tried this and look at her. She has her life back, and she has a well control of her condition, and she has a quality of life because she's not sedated anymore. So that's why, I mean, for me, make me so sad and so frustrated. I only have two options. If I don't have access to CBD, what I'm going to have to do, go back to the pharmaceuticals and then keep destroying, keep harming my child with the pharmaceuticals, and they don't work, and they keep destroying her little body. I mean, you read the side effects of that prescription, and many of them, they're so strong that you have to sign when you receive the prescription. You have to sign that you're responsible, that you're aware of the side effects. And that's okay with everybody. They prescribe it, and they sell it, and that is totally legal. That's the part that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important for us as media professionals to let people know that no matter where they live, if a CBD product is being sold online, the likelihood that they can't have Child Protective Services take their kids away is pretty great, and they're safe to order this and try it with their children.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, just even listening to Damaris and keep in mind, Sadie has always been one of the best visual stories because they put the child on Percocet, a steroid, and it really changed her appearance in a really awful way. But the visuals, Sadie's with us for a reason, and one thing I've learned from working with special needs kids is everybody's here for a reason. They really are, and I've learned a lot about that. And visually, Sadie's story just told so much that CBS 8 News put the family on TV. You could just see how bad the child looked on Percocet and these pharmaceuticals, and then as opposed to literally the Higueras have her on the cannabis oil and almost nothing else now. Really that's what depresses me now is, the DEA changed a tracking code. The media just completely flipped out, and part of the reasons are there is a very, very pro-marijuana activist contingent, part of the country that's pro-full legalization, that actually I support. I believe that marijuana should be legal and no one should go to jail for possessing it, but not all of them are the biggest fans of the quote-unquote hemp CBD folks in the industry. They don't like the CBD thing and the hemp CBD thing. They don't like companies like Dr. Titus's that found a way actually to make hemp CBD legally, which it is legal. It's not scheduled. All that's not true. And this explosion of stories out there that the DEA has scheduled CBD. I mean, they didn't, and it's the craziest thing to be reading that in the Men's Journal and RollingStone.com, and it's like, holy crap, the misinformation. Think about how many families like Damaris's that's going to frighten away from trying this.
Right, and it almost seems that the optics was the main purpose. And, if not the political reasons, I mean, perhaps the administrator wants to keep his job when the new when the new administration comes in, and they're trying to win favor with Jeff Sessions or something, I mean, either that or really support their friends in the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, why else quote it in the actual directive? I mean, that's crazy.
I think it's interesting, Snowden, at least two companies that I know of, and there probably are more, two pharmaceutical companies have, and at least one is in clinical trials for synthetic CBD.
Yes.
So their interest is very clear in when they're motivations.
Right. Well,
money,
and also
money.
Yep,
yeah,
exactly.
and also one of them actually here in Arizona makes fentanyl, which is a synthetic.
That killed Prince.
What's that?
Prince.
Yeah, that's right.
Prince was addicted to fentanyl.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's killed a number of not just famous people, but millions probably of others. Millions. That's an overstatement, but you know what I'm saying. It's a lot. So they've put a lot of money into preventing legalization from happening, and I know that they actually dumped a lot of money into the Arizona measure, Prop 205, which didn't pass, unfortunately. Yeah.
The false commercials, misconstruing statistics from Colorado saying that, actually crime had gone up and
cities couldn't, and people couldn't get money into their education and all kinds of lies. I mean, it was horrible. And those lies went viral here, when public officials were reiterating these lies over and over and over again. It was just...
Yeah, I mean, I am all in favor of having a reasoned debate about it, which is that, the truth is natural botanical CBD is not scheduled. As the counselor said, it specifically says that synthetic CBD is scheduled, actually. But a reasoned debate about all of the actual facts of, what is the best thing to do, I'm all in favor of. What's really just sad to me is just lies perpetuating online and like mudslinging and then also knowing that, as the counselor and I were joking that, pharmaceutical dollars and, industry dollars is behind it. After working with families like Damaris's, that's what's just really saddening to me. Really, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, so, it begs the question, where do we go from here? We've got an administration that's definitely a foe of legalization.
Well, Trump's FDA nominee is apparently some kind of cannabis activist-y guy. So supposedly the gentleman he's offered to, potentially head the FDA is pro-cannabis.
I find that interesting and sort of contradictory of his nominee for Attorney General.
And and Trump himself is an advocate of medical, at least. I know he's kind of wavers on the fence for recreational, but he's said himself that he's seen it from a friend who used it to help with treatment, and he's very much in favor of medical, which I see as, a little optimistic, although with Trump it's hard to know really where to go. But then again, like you said, Jeff Sessions is a avid opponent of marijuana and facts. So, it's just kind of a wait-and-see game.
Yeah. I know that he has said that he advocates for states' rights to
I don't think he'll touch the states.
Yeah.
He is a businessman, too. He knows he's got to keep the economy strong. And what you've got now, after the election... you had 8 states just legalized. Florida passing a medical marijuana bill is just huge news.
Yeah.
And then you have Massachusetts, California, and Nevada all go legal the way Colorado, Oregon, Washington, and Alaska already are.
Yeah, that's phenomenal, and I think that's going to open a lot of doors.
Tens of thousands of jobs.
Before we get too close to the end of the show, because we're getting close to a time to wrap up, I really want to hear some pretty exciting news from Damaris. You've put out a request, I understand, to the Make-A-Wish Foundation to actually meet Donald Trump and show him how important cannabis has been to Sadie. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I think the part that we can help with is tell our story and get it all the way to, if it's possible, to our next president, and make this clear and there is something true, there's something that's helping so many patients, and I mean, laws have to change. The results are there, the proof are right there. If cannabis get out of the Schedule 1 drug, we want to have the access that we all deserve and that we all need. So what better wish for my daughter that make sure she's able to keep her treatment, that she doesn't have to give up cannabis for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that keeps her alive. I mean, we already went through all that. We already tried everything. This is the only thing that keeps her alive. Her condition is a really bad condition, and this gives her a quality of life. Why? I mean, that's what better gift for her than having a quality of life until she can. I mean, her syndrome is so rare that we don't know if it's going to be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is. She deserves to have the best quality of life possible, and that only thing that's going to give her is cannabis.
Yeah, and it's giving her the best chance for survival in the long term.
It is. It's controlling her epilepsy and giving a good and other areas of her issues. Her kidney function is excellent. Her tumors are gone. Cannabis is not only helping her epilepsy, it's helping her whole condition improve. So yeah. I mean, I just, if I can reach out to these lawmakers and making conscious that what really is going on. People, they really want help for this country. They really want to help. They really want to help people to get what they're gonna what they need. Not because of political issues, not because of money issues. What really is working for them, they have to look at it. They have to reconsider all this.
Yeah, one last quick thing. You mentioned her tumors were gone. She had a tumor, I guess, on her liver. Is that right?
Yes, and we discovered through ultrasound, a routine ultrasound, at the time that we actually start her on the oil. So every 3 months we have that type of ultrasound, and since she started using it, every 3 months we see it going smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
The doctors was just getting ready to, it's going to just, like every other case, it's going to get worse and it's going to be big, and we're not going to go for a surgery based on her condition and this and that. But one day that we went for that routine ultrasound, it was gone.
Yeah.
I was like, something happened, because they actually called another technician to review the ultrasound, the images, and they didn't say nothing to me. I said, what happened? They said, well, no, we have to review this again. Well, the thing is, they couldn't find it anymore.
Right, and the National Institute of Health has actually come out and said that cannabis has anti-tumor qualities.
It does. I mean, like I say, it's not only my daughter. There's thousands of cases.
Mm-hmm.
You can see them improve in many areas.
And new studies coming out too, and we're gathering now as many new studies and peer-reviewed articles as we can possibly get our hands on. So, anytime you come across one, let us know. We'll put it up on our website. And but meanwhile, real quick before we wrap up, let's just go over some of the things that people can do. Because obviously, as you mentioned, Tabitha, they can contact their senators, their representatives, get involved. I think that, if you disagree that Sessions might be the right person to govern policy on this issue, call your senators and ask them, to disapprove of him or not, but tell them what it is that you'd like to see happen, and get involved with the social media and tell your friends that you approve of CBD, and that and also help people understand that false news is not helping anything. So if you see a story, respond.
Share Snowden's post to your Facebook that the DEA just made CBD scheduled is untrue. And stop frightening people is a major thing you can do. Everybody post to your Facebook the recent hysteria that the DEA either made CBD illegal or scheduled it is completely untrue. It's almost laughably not true. And that's something. I mean, social media has been a mess with like lies. So anybody who can share, everybody calm down and stop scaring people. That's a major way we can help.
Yeah. Well, it's absolutely true. And we have Sadie's story up online. We have the
that Sadie wants to meet Donald Trump to have him reschedule.
Yeah. So we have that on our website, thecannabisreporter.com. And we also have this topic up online, and we'll put this show up online as well. And please feel free to share it widely, because I think the more people that understand the importance of this issue, the better. So I'd like to personally thank our guests, Tabitha Myers, Andrew Hard, and Damaris Higuera, for joining us today. Really appreciate this discussion, and look forward to hearing more from all of you. Please visit us online at thecannabisreporter.com to learn more about our guests and today's topic, or download the podcast of today's show. I'd like to thank Josh, our engineer here at KFNX, for all he does. Thank you, and many thanks to all of you for listening. Please share what you've learned here today and get involved. Tune in again next week, same time, same place. I'm Snowden Bishop, the Cannabis Reporter. Until we meet again, make it an amazing day.
Evergreen is calling, evergreen is always where I feel divine. The blue's blue falling, and sheets made forever across the great divide in my mind.
You're listening to Independent Talk 1100 KFNX, Cave Creek, Phoenix, a division of Premier Radio Stations.